There were nights when I sat in a quiet room and the silence felt heavier than noise. It wasn't peaceful, it was the kind that made my chest ache. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator, the faint sounds outside, but inside it was just still. I kept scrolling through my phone, watching people laugh, travel, live, and even though I was connected, I felt completely invisible. Maybe you've been there too, surrounded by people, but disconnected from everything that matters. For a long time, I believed loneliness meant I was broken, that if I tried harder, smiled more, stayed busy enough, it would go away. But it didn't. Because loneliness doesn't always come from being alone. It comes from feeling unseen, from carrying things no one asks about, from realizing that people hear your words but don't catch your meaning. That's the kind of loneliness that lingers even in a crowd. Science has a name for this. Psychologist John Cacioppo, who studied loneliness for decades, discovered that when we feel isolated, our brains move into self-protection mode. We become more alert, more cautious, sometimes even defensive, as if we expect rejection before it happens. And the cruel irony is that this makes us pull away even more. Loneliness isn't just an emotion, it's a biological response. It's your brain trying to keep you safe, even if it means keeping you apart. What changed everything for me was realizing that loneliness wasn't an enemy to fight. It was a signal to listen to. Like hunger tells you to eat, loneliness tells you that something inside you needs connection, not just with others, but with yourself. When I started to treat it that way, things shifted. I took quiet walks without my phone, wrote in a journal, made small moments of calm where I could just exist, not perform, not explain, just be. Slowly, that silence started to feel different. It didn't hurt as much. I stopped trying to fill it and began to let it breathe. The room didn't feel empty anymore. It felt like space. Space to think, to rest, to feel again. That's when I realized solitude and loneliness aren't the same thing. One drains you, the other restores you. We all go through it. Heartbreak, distance, the quiet after loss. Loneliness doesn't mean you failed at life. It means you're still human enough to crave meaning and connection. And that craving, no matter how painful, is proof that your heart still works. So if you're listening right now and feel that ache, you're not broken. You're just in the quiet part of healing. This is where it begins, not by running from the silence, but by learning to breathe inside it. Together, we'll find the healthy ways to do that, one small, gentle step at a time. There was a time when I thought loneliness was simple, something that only happened when no one was around. But the truth turned out to be more complicated. You can have people who love you, a full schedule, even someone lying next to you at night, and still feel completely alone. I think that's because loneliness isn't about how many people are in your life. It's about how deeply you feel understood, how connected you are, not just in conversation, but in meaning. Psychologists often describe loneliness as the gap between the relationships you have and the ones you long for. It's that invisible distance between I'm fine and I wish someone really knew me. You might be surrounded by voices, laughter, movement, and yet something inside you stays untouched. It's like being in a room full of people speaking a language you almost recognize but can't quite join in. The sound fills your ears, but not your heart. Science shows us that loneliness isn't just an emotion, it's a biological signal. When the brain senses disconnection, it activates the same regions that respond to physical pain. Researchers at UCLA found that social rejection lights up the same neural pathways as a burn or a bruise. That's why heartbreak feels like it physically hurts, because in many ways, it does. Your body can't tell the difference between emotional pain and physical pain. It simply knows something essential to survival, belonging, is missing. But understanding the science doesn't make it easier to feel. Many of us were raised to believe that needing others makes us weak. We were taught to be independent, to handle everything on our own, to smile through the struggle. So when loneliness appears, shame often follows. We hide it behind busyness, achievements, or a screen full of noise. We tell ourselves we're fine. But deep inside, our nervous system is still reaching, longing for safety, warmth, resonance. The feeling of being seen without having to explain ourselves. And when that longing goes unanswered for too long, something inside starts to close off. The mind turns inward, whispering doubts. Maybe I'm too much. Maybe I don't fit anywhere. But those thoughts don't mean you're broken. They mean you've been disconnected for too long. Loneliness is not a flaw to be ashamed of. It's a signal, just like hunger or thirst. It's your inner world telling you that you're out of sync with the emotional nourishment you need. When you start to see loneliness this way, as a message rather than a failure, it becomes easier to listen to it without fear. You can begin asking yourself what it's trying to tell you. Maybe it's asking for connection, not in quantity, but in honesty. Maybe it's reminding you to reach for depth instead of distraction. Because the opposite of loneliness isn't constant company, it's emotional truth. And emotional truth begins with presence, being willing to sit with yourself even when it's uncomfortable, to let the quiet speak, to feel what you've been avoiding. That's the first step toward healing, not running from the ache, but understanding what it's asking for. So if you've been blaming yourself for feeling lonely, take a breath. There's nothing wrong with you. This feeling doesn't mean you're failing at life. It means your heart still knows what it needs: connection, meaning, closeness, and care. Loneliness isn't proof that you're broken. It's proof that you still care deeply enough to want more. And the moment you start to honor that, the moment you stop seeing your loneliness as weakness and start seeing it as wisdom, that's when healing begins. When I finally stopped running from my loneliness, I realized something I hadn't seen before. The first person I needed to reconnect with wasn't someone out there, it was me. For years, I'd tried to fill the silence with distractions, endless scrolling, overworking, texting just to feel a response, to avoid being alone with my own thoughts. But the strange thing about noise is that it always fades, and when it does, the same emptiness quietly returns. I used to think the world had left me behind, but the truth was simpler. I had forgotten how to be with myself. It sounds easy to love yourself, but anyone who's tried knows it's not. Being comfortable in your own company can feel like learning a new language, one no one ever taught you. We grow up learning how to please others, how to achieve, how to meet expectations. But few of us are taught how to sit still and face our own mind. When the external noise finally stops, it's not peaceful at first. It's overwhelming. The thoughts you've buried, the memories you've ignored, the insecurities you've masked, they all begin to speak. And listening to them can feel like facing a stranger who somehow knows everything about you. Psychologists call this process self-connection, the act of rebuilding an emotional relationship with yourself. It's not indulgence, it's survival. Dr. Kristin Neff, a leading researcher in self-compassion, found that when people practice kindness toward themselves, their brains release oxytocin and reduce cortisol, the stress hormone. The result is profound: lower anxiety, fewer depressive symptoms, and even less loneliness. Because when you learn to treat yourself like a friend rather than a failure, your nervous system stops interpreting solitude as danger and starts experiencing it as safety. For me, it began with small, quiet gestures. I stopped rushing to fix my feelings. Instead of numbing loneliness with distraction, I tried naming it. I'd say, I feel disconnected right now. I'd write it down in a notebook, sometimes even speak it out loud. At first, it felt awkward, even silly, but over time, it became grounding. Talking to myself gently was like opening a window in a room that had been closed for years. I started saying the words I had always wanted to hear from someone else. It's okay. You're tired. You're human. You don't have to be perfect to deserve peace. Slowly, something in me softened. The more I practiced, the more I understood that self-connection isn't about isolating yourself. It's about learning to be your own safe space. When you're at peace with who you are, you stop trying to use relationships to fill your emptiness. You stop begging for belonging and begin choosing connection that aligns with your wholeness. You approach people not with fear of being alone, but with curiosity, warmth, and stability. Because when you no longer need others to complete you, you can finally meet them as equals, two whole humans, not two broken halves searching for repair. That's what loneliness had been trying to teach me all along. It wasn't punishing me, it was guiding me. It was asking me to return to the parts of myself I'd abandoned, the ones that were waiting patiently to be acknowledged. Once I began listening, I realized solitude isn't the same as isolation. Solitude is the quiet space where your real self begins to breathe again. It's where you rebuild trust with yourself, one honest moment at a time. Healing, I learnt, doesn't begin when someone else sees you. It begins when you finally see yourself clearly, gently, without the filter of judgment. When you stop demanding perfection and start offering compassion, that's the turning point. That's when being alone stops feeling like being unloved and starts feeling like coming home. So maybe that's the heart of it. Loneliness isn't something to escape, but something to understand. Because the longest, most important relationship you'll ever have is the one you build with your own heart. And like any relationship, it needs time, patience, and kindness. You don't have to fix everything today. Just start by sitting quietly, breathing deeply, and reminding yourself you're still here, and that's enough. This is where healing begins, not in noise, but in gentle return to yourself. Once I started feeling more at peace with myself, something subtle but powerful began to shift the way I related to others. I wasn't chasing people anymore, trying to earn love or fill an emptiness. I could finally see people as they were, not as reflections of what I needed. That's when connection began to feel real again. Because the truth is, we can't build meaningful relationships when we're still trying to prove our worth inside them. Real connection starts when you stop performing and start being. Deep connection isn't measured by how often you talk or how similar your interests are. It's measured by how safe you feel to be your full self. Emotional safety means you can share your truth, your fears, your hopes, your messy humanity without fearing judgment. Researcher Brené Brown calls vulnerability the birthplace of connection. When you allow yourself to be seen as imperfect, you invite authenticity from others too. It's not about impressing someone with strength. It's about connecting through honesty. That's where real trust begins, not through performance, but through presence. It took me a long time to understand that listening, truly listening, is one of the purest forms of love. Real connection doesn't always need advice, solutions, or constant words. Sometimes it just needs attention. When I stopped trying to fill silence with chatter and simply listened, something remarkable happened. People opened up more. They felt lighter, calmer, and in those moments of quiet understanding, the space between us didn't feel empty anymore. It felt alive. But to build deeper relationships, you have to take small emotional risks. It means saying, "I miss you," or "I've been struggling lately," even when you're unsure how the other person will respond. It means reaching out first instead of waiting for someone else to do it. Each act of openness is a doorway, not a guarantee, but a chance. And healing happens in those chances. When you dare to be honest, you give others permission to meet you there. Of course, not every connection will last, and that's okay. Some people are chapters, not the whole story. The goal isn't to have more friends, it's to have true ones. Ask yourself, who makes you feel seen, not just entertained? Who leaves you feeling peaceful, not drained? Those are the people worth keeping close. And maintaining those bonds doesn't require big gestures. It's often as simple as being consistent, replying when you can, showing up when you say you will, or remembering the small details that matter to them. That reliability builds emotional safety over time. Loneliness doesn't disappear when you collect more contacts or fill your calendar. It fades when you start to matter, not to everyone, but to someone. When you invest in relationships that nurture both sides, connection becomes mutual care, not effort. You start to feel what it means to belong, not because you fit in, but because you are accepted. In the end, connection isn't something we stumble upon. It's something we build slowly, breath by breath, truth by truth. It grows through shared moments, a quiet walk, an honest conversation, a kind glance that says, "I see you." And when it's real, even silence feels safe. You don't have to fill the air or prove your worth. You can just be, and that's enough. Because the deepest kind of connection doesn't erase loneliness by surrounding you with people. It transforms it by teaching you that love isn't found in noise, it's found in presence. When you meet others from a place of peace instead of need, every shared breath, every pause, every unspoken understanding becomes a reminder that home isn't a place or a person, it's a feeling you create together. There was a time when I thought being online meant I was connected, that constant notifications, messages, and endless scrolling somehow filled the quiet. I could see hundreds of smiling faces, vacations, birthdays, and perfect sunsets all within seconds. But the longer I stared at the screen, the emptier I felt. It wasn't envy, it was distance, like I was watching life through glass, close enough to see it, but too far to touch. Everything looked alive, yet nothing felt real. Psychologists call this the illusion of connection. Our brains evolved to respond to real human presence, eye contact, tone of voice, the warmth of touch. Those things regulate our emotions, calm our nervous system, and make us feel safe. But on social media, those cues are replaced with likes, emojis, and comments. Each one gives a tiny hit of dopamine, the brain's reward chemical, the same one we get from laughter or food. It feels good for a second, but fades fast. And when it fades, we crave more. That's how the cycle keeps us hooked. Scrolling not out of joy, but out of quiet loneliness disguised as connection. The research from the University of Pennsylvania found that cutting social media use to under 30 minutes a day can reduce loneliness and depression in just a few weeks. It's not because people suddenly become antisocial, it's because they start reclaiming presence. They replace endless comparison with genuine experience. Because what we mistake for connection online is often just stimulation, constant, shallow, and never enough to touch what really matters. Comparison is the other trap that deepens the ache. When you see carefully curated lives, filtered smiles, perfect homes, ideal relationships, your brain starts measuring your behind the scenes against everyone else's highlight reel. You begin to wonder, why does everyone else seem okay except me? That quiet shame pushes you further inward. You stop posting, stop reaching out, not because you don't care, but because you feel like you'll never be enough. Loneliness grows not in the absence of people, but in the distance between who you are and who you think you're supposed to be. What helped me wasn't deleting everything, it was reclaiming how I used it. I started asking myself simple questions. Am I connecting or just consuming? Am I learning or just escaping? I unfollowed accounts that drained me, the ones that made me feel small or restless. I kept the ones that felt honest, people who spoke with kindness, not perfection. I began setting phone-free hours every night, letting the silence return. At first, it felt uncomfortable, almost itchy, like my hands didn't know what to do. But over time, the quiet stopped feeling empty. It started feeling peaceful. And in that peace, I began to notice life again. The sound of the rain against the window, the warmth of my coffee, the simple joy of laughing without recording it. I realized something important. Presence is the medicine for loneliness. The world doesn't need to be documented to be real. The problem isn't technology itself. It's forgetting that human connection can't be digitized. You can't download eye contact, or stream warmth, or save the feeling of belonging into a folder. Those things can only exist in moments, in touch, in tone, in stillness, shared with someone who truly sees you. Technology can be a bridge, but it's not a home. The real danger is when we start using it to replace what can only happen offline. Connection doesn't live in pixels, it lives in presence. It's in the way someone listens, the way laughter fills a room, or the silence between two people who don't need to fill it with noise. So, if you ever feel like you're drowning in a sea of screens, remember, it's not attention you're starving for, it's presence. Turn it off for a while, step outside, let your senses wake up again, feel the air instead of the algorithm, listen to the world that doesn't need your likes, your comments, or your filters. It's still here waiting for you to look up, to see it, and to come back home to it. There was a time when I thought the only way to feel less lonely was to find someone who could fill the empty space inside me. But what I didn't realize was that sometimes the way to heal isn't by receiving, it's by giving. The moment I stopped asking, who will be there for me, and started asking, who can I be there for, something in me began to shift. Because when you turn your focus outward, the world quietly opens back up. It doesn't have to be something grand. Sometimes it's just checking on a friend, helping a neighbor carry groceries, or even smiling at a stranger who looks like they've had a hard day. Acts of kindness, even small ones, remind you that you still have the power to make a difference. Psychologists call this the helper's high, a natural release of dopamine and oxytocin that happens when we give. These chemicals lower stress, calm the nervous system, and restore the sense of connection that loneliness takes away. Research from the University of British Columbia found that people who regularly engage in altruistic acts like volunteering or supporting others show measurable improvements in mood and emotional regulation. Their brains literally start to rewire away from isolation. Because giving tells your mind a simple truth. You still matter. You still have something to offer. But beyond the science, there's a deeper kind of healing that happens. When you give, you step outside of your own pain, not to escape it, but to expand around it. You remember that other people are fighting their own quiet battles too. And in helping them, you start to understand your own humanity more clearly. Compassion becomes the bridge between your world and theirs. Sometimes, the smallest gesture can echo further than you think. A kind word can soften someone's day. A moment of listening can save someone from feeling invisible. And in giving what you once needed understanding, warmth, patience, you give it back to yourself too. This doesn't mean you should give until you're empty. True service doesn't drain you, it grounds you. It reconnects you to something larger, a shared pulse of life that reminds you you're never truly alone. So the next time the loneliness feels heavy, try this. Instead of asking who will notice your pain, look for someone whose pain you can gently touch. It's not about fixing anyone, it's about meeting them, human to human. In that meeting, loneliness begins to lose its shape, because when you help someone else heal, a part of you heals too. There was a period when I thought the only way to overcome loneliness was to push through it, to keep myself busy enough that I wouldn't have to feel it. But ignoring pain doesn't make it disappear. It just teaches it to hide deeper. What finally helped wasn't strength but softness. The quiet choice to be kind to myself, even when I didn't feel I deserved it. Self-compassion sounds simple, but for many of us it's the hardest practice. We speak to ourselves in ways we would never speak to a friend, calling ourselves weak, unlovable, not enough. Psychologist Kristin Neff, who pioneered research on self-compassion, explains that treating yourself with kindness activates the caregiving system in the brain, releasing oxytocin, lowering cortisol, and calming the stress response. In other words, gentleness is not weakness, it's a biological pathway to healing. When you feel lonely, your mind often turns against you. It tells you stories that no one cares, that you'll always be on the outside. Mindfulness helps interrupt that loop. It doesn't try to fix the thought, it simply notices it. I'm feeling lonely right now. That simple sentence shifts everything. You stop fighting the emotion and start seeing it as a passing state, not an identity. There's power in pausing, in taking a deep breath and noticing the warmth of the air entering your lungs, in feeling your feet on the ground and remembering that in this exact moment you are safe. Neuroscientists at Harvard have shown that even 8 weeks of regular mindfulness practice can reshape areas of the brain linked to emotional regulation and empathy. Presence, quite literally, rewires pain. I started small, one mindful cup of coffee each morning. No phone, no noise, just me noticing the taste, the warmth, the stillness. It wasn't dramatic, but it was honest, and in that honesty, I began to feel connected again. Not to anyone else at first, but to myself. That connection is the foundation of every other kind. Self-compassion also means forgiving the parts of you that still ache. The version of you that stayed too long, that hoped too hard, that didn't know better. Healing doesn't ask for perfection, only patience. When you can sit beside your loneliness without judgment, it slowly transforms into understanding. So tonight, if you feel that familiar ache returning, try not to run. Sit with it, breathe. Whisper to yourself, it's okay to feel this. Because it is. Loneliness is not proof that you're unloved. It's proof that you're still open to love. And every moment you meet yourself with kindness, you step closer to peace. There's a quiet moment that arrives after all the noise, after you've tried to fill every empty hour, after the scrolling, the searching, the pretending that everything's fine. It comes without warning, like the world suddenly exhales and leaves you alone with yourself. For the first time, you notice the weight of the silence, not heavy like before, but honest. It's the kind of quiet that doesn't accuse or demand. It just asks you to stay. That's when something shifts. You begin to see that loneliness isn't your enemy, it's your mirror. It shows you where you've been running from yourself through distractions, through people, through endless busyness. It reflects the parts of you that have been waiting to be seen, not by others, but by you. And the longer you sit there, the more you realize that maybe what you've been searching for out there has been trying to reach you from within. Healing, I've learned, doesn't happen all at once. It's not an explosion of joy or a single breakthrough moment. It's quieter than that, more like a slow sunrise that you almost don't notice until the light touches your face. It's the morning you wake up and the air feels softer, the moment you catch yourself breathing easier, the night you cry without shame, and something inside you finally unclenches. That's healing, the small, steady return to yourself. Science might describe this as neural rewiring, mindfulness might call it presence, but in truth, it's peace. A peace that comes from no longer fighting your own emotions. When you stop pushing away your loneliness and start listening to it, your nervous system begins to calm. Your breath deepens. Your body, which has been bracing for so long, starts to remember safety. And in that remembering, life begins to feel a little less sharp, a little more whole. In that stillness, beauty starts to return quietly, humbly. You see it in the sunlight stretching across your kitchen counter, in the smell of morning coffee, in the rhythm of your footsteps on a quiet street. You find it in forgiveness, not of someone else, but of yourself. Because loneliness, when you stop fearing it, becomes a teacher. It teaches you that presence doesn't need to be filled, it just needs to be felt. I think that's what we forget most easily, that we don't need someone else to complete us. We just need to remember that the light we keep searching for in others is already flickering inside us. It's in the smallest acts, the deep breath before you face the day, the kind thought you offer yourself after a hard moment, the way you keep going even when no one sees your effort. That's what real strength looks like, not loud, but lasting. And when you do meet people again, and you will, something will have changed. You'll show up differently. You'll no longer reach out from emptiness, but from overflow. You'll be able to love without clinging, to listen without fear, to be seen without performing. You'll realize that healthy connection isn't about dependency, it's about resonance. Two people who have both found home within themselves, meeting halfway. So if you're sitting in a quiet room tonight, wondering when the loneliness will end, maybe this is it, not the ending, but the turning. The moment when emptiness begins to soften into space. The moment when silence stops being a wall and becomes a doorway. You don't need to escape it, you only need to let it open. Because solitude isn't emptiness, it's where the light comes in and where the healing finally begins. If this message found you at a quiet moment, take it as a reminder you're not alone in what you feel. Healing begins in small, ordinary ways. One breath, one act of kindness, one honest conversation. If this video brought you a sense of calm or clarity, share it with someone who might need that same light. And if you'd like to keep exploring how to heal and reconnect, stay with us. Your journey matters here.